The twin suns of Haven's Reach rose slowly over silver oceans, painting the skies in soft shades of gold and crimson. The colony was alive with morning light, children running along the docks, engineers heading to the power stations, traders setting up their stalls in the shining streets of New Eden City. It was a world built on peace and hard work, far from the wars and greed that once defined humanity. The people of Haven's Reach had begun to believe they were safe. They laughed easily, spoke kindly, and dreamed of the future. No one noticed the faint shadow crossing the upper atmosphere. The scanners did, but at first, no one paid attention. It was common for passing vessels to appear near the trade routes. But then, one signal became 10. 10 became 50. The alarms began to sound. Inside the command center, the air filled with tension. Governor Elias Marek stood before the main holographic display as red dots began to appear across the orbital grid. Unidentified ships approaching from high orbit, a technician reported, his voice trembling. "We're trying to hail them, but they're not responding." The governor frowned, leaning closer to the display. "How many ships?" "Too many, sir," came the answer. The technician's hands moved quickly across consoles, activating defense protocols. The colony's defense satellites armed themselves, but they were mining-grade security drones, not war machines. They weren't built for battle. Outside, the people of New Eden looked up as the sky began to darken. The sun still shone, but a strange shadow spread across the horizon. Clouds twisted unnaturally, and something massive moved behind them. A child pointed to the heavens. "Mom, what's that?" The mother squinted, her heart sinking as she saw the glowing streaks of descending ships. Within seconds, the colony's sirens screamed through the city. "This is an emergency alert," a robotic voice echoed through speakers. "All citizens proceed to designated shelters immediately." Panic followed. Cars rushed through the streets. Parents carried children. The calm world of Haven's Reach turned into chaos. From orbit, the alien fleet descended in perfect formation. Dozens of enormous ships shaped like black spines blotted out the suns. The lead vessel opened its bays, revealing thousands of smaller craft that poured through the atmosphere like a storm. Inside the command center, one of the officers shouted, "They're locking weapons." The governor's face went pale. "On civilians? That's impossible." But there was no time to think. The first beam struck. It hit the northern city, turning entire blocks into molten glass. The ground shook violently as the shockwave ripped through buildings. Screams filled every frequency. "They're targeting population centers," another voice cried. "Governor, we have to evacuate." Elias grabbed the comm unit. "This is Governor Marek of Haven's Reach calling any nearby fleet. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Civilians are dying. We need—" His voice cut off as another blast hit nearby, collapsing part of the command center. The screens went black, and dust filled the air. He stumbled through the smoke, coughing. "Get that signal out," he shouted. "Someone has to hear us." The communications officer crawled to her console, blood trickling down her forehead. "I'm trying," she whispered. "It's jammed. They're blocking us." She typed frantically, bypassing the main system. Static filled the air, and through it, a single transmission broke free. "Earth Command." She gasped into the MAC, "They're burning everything." Then the console exploded, and the room went silent. Across the colony, there was no escape. The orbital defenses were vaporized in minutes. The cities of Haven's Reach fell one by one, their towers reduced to glowing rubble. People fled into the forests, into caves, anywhere that offered cover. But the aliens hunted them relentlessly. They spoke no words, gave no warning, and showed no mercy. The sound of their weapons was like thunder, rolling endlessly through the skies. The twin suns dimmed behind smoke and fire until the world itself seemed to fade into darkness. Hours later, when the last fires began to die, the once beautiful colony was gone. Nothing moved. The oceans boiled near the coasts, and the winds carried ash instead of sea spray. The alien fleet lingered for a moment longer, scanning for survivors, then vanished into the stars, leaving behind a ghost world. No life signs remained, no signals, no cities, only silence. On Earth, in the heart of Sol Command, technicians sat in stunned silence as the last transmission from Haven's Reach arrived. Static filled the main communication chamber. Then the faint, broken voice of a woman came through. "They are burning everything." The audio cut out with a sharp crack. For a moment, no one moved. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Admiral Taran Holt turned slowly toward the display showing the colony's location. A red dot blinking alone in space. "Try to re-establish contact," he said. "Sir, there's nothing left," a young officer replied quietly. "All signals are gone." Around the room, screens showed the satellite feed, the planet's surface covered in clouds of ash. The Admiral stared for a long time, his reflection flickering in the light. "Who did this?" he asked. No one answered. One officer hesitated before whispering. "Reports indicate the Velcor Dominion patrols were near that sector." The room fell even quieter. Everyone knew the Velcor, an aggressive alien empire that had always despised humanity's expansion. But even they had never dared an open attack before. "They wanted to test us," someone muttered. "They wanted to see how far they could go." The Admiral clenched his fists. "They just found out," he said softly, his eyes cold and sharp as steel. "And now the galaxy will too." He walked to the main command platform and pressed his hand against the activation console. "Alert the defense assembly," he ordered. "I want every fleet on standby. This is no longer a request for peace. This is war." As the command center came alive with activity, thousands of ships in orbit began powering up. Engines roared, lights flared, and Earth itself seemed to awaken from centuries of restraint. The loss of Haven's Reach was more than a tragedy, it was a spark. The stars outside gleamed faintly, as if waiting for what would come next. And deep within every human heart, grief turned into something colder, sharper, unstoppable. Humanity had been struck first. The silence of Haven's Reach would soon be replaced by the roar of vengeance. The news of Haven's Reach spread through the galaxy like a storm ripping through calm skies. Within hours, every human network, from Earth to the farthest lunar outpost, broadcast the same horrifying message. The colony was gone. 50,000 men, women, and children, erased in minutes. The holoscreens showed only a grainy final image. The twin suns of Haven's Reach fading behind a wall of smoke and fire. On Earth, people gathered in silence in front of those screens. No one spoke. No one moved. Across cities, flags lowered, and streets fell quiet. Humanity had seen tragedy before, but this was different. This wasn't nature, or accident, or fate. This was slaughter. At Sol Command, the atmosphere was suffocating. The central briefing chamber, usually filled with calm efficiency, now vibrated with restrained fury. Dozens of military officers, diplomats, and scientists crowded around the central display, where a rotating image of Haven's Reach shimmered, a glowing sphere now covered in red burn marks. Admiral Taran Holt stood at the head of the table, his jaw tight, his voice low but steady. "We've confirmed the attackers," he said. "The ships match Velcor Dominion design, heavy plasma cannons, tricore drives, no life signals left behind." The room erupted in outrage. "Those cowards," someone shouted. "They think we'll just take this." Another slammed his fist against the table. "They've crossed the line." The Admiral raised his hand, and the room fell silent. "I know what you're all feeling," he said, his voice heavy with grief and control. "I feel it too. But before we act, we make sure we act right. The last time the galaxy underestimated us, it ended in ashes. We will not give them that satisfaction again." Around him, the officers nodded, but the rage in their eyes burned. The memory of the old wars still lingered, the times when humanity had fought entire empires to survive, back when Earth was surrounded, cornered, and called a primitive world. Humanity had survived every time, but this time, it wasn't about survival. It was about justice. In the cities of Earth, grief turned into determination. Factories that had been silent for decades came alive again. Massive orbital shipyards reactivated. The sound of engines, construction, and mobilization filled the skies. Across continents, recruitment centers overflowed. Young men and women lined up, not for adventure, not for glory, but for vengeance. They carried the images of Haven's Reach in their minds, burned there like scars. One volunteer, a miner from Titan, stood before the camera and said, "We build ships for others no more. This time, we build for our own." His words spread like wildfire across every colony. The government convened an emergency session. The Prime Council's chamber glowed under the cold light of holographic projectors. Leaders from Earth, Mars, Europa, and dozens of colonies appeared as flickering images. "We cannot afford a full-scale war," argued one senator. "If we strike, the entire Dominion will unite against us." Another slammed her fist on the desk. "They already have. They erased an entire colony, and you're worried about politics." The arguments grew louder until the council chairwoman stood. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Enough. Haven's Reach was not just a colony. It was a symbol of our unity. They didn't attack a planet. They attacked humanity itself. And that means we answer as one." The chamber fell silent. "Effective immediately," she declared, "we activate the Full Soul Defense Initiative." That phrase had not been spoken in 100 years. Across the galaxy, Earth's greatest strength came alive, the unity of its people. Orbital stations began producing new warships at record speed. Engineers worked in shifts, sleeping at their consoles. AI systems designed for trade were repurposed for strategy. Shipyards on Mars and Luna synchronized production, their lights burning brighter than the stars above them. Massive dreadnoughts, cruisers, and carriers began to take form, each one bearing a single name on its hull, the name of a victim from Haven's Reach. Meanwhile, deep in the shadow of space, humanity's fleet admirals gathered aboard the Dauntless Prime, the largest warship ever built. Its hull stretched for miles, its surface gleaming like liquid steel. Inside its command chamber, holographic projections of the galaxy floated in midair, red markers showing every known Velcor system. Admiral Holt stood before them, his eyes fixed on the map. "They believe we are slow. That our democracy weakens us. That emotion makes us fragile." He looked up at his officers. "They have mistaken patience for weakness. They have mistaken mercy for surrender. They will learn the difference." Across human space, messages were sent to every colony, every outpost, every citizen. "To all of humanity, we grieve, but we do not yield. The fires of Haven's Reach will light our way forward. We will respond, not with fear, but with resolve." The response was overwhelming. Entire mining guilds offered their resources freely. Civilian shipbuilders converted their freighters into war transports. Scientists from the universities of Luna abandoned their studies to join the fleet. Even the smallest asteroid settlements sent what they could: fuel, materials, food, or soldiers. Humanity had become one heartbeat, pulsing with purpose. While humanity prepared, the Velcor Dominion laughed. In their glittering throne world, alien commanders toasted their victory. Their leader, Lord Zarven, stood before a grand audience and declared, "Let this be a warning to the galaxy. No one defies the Dominion." He raised a chalice filled with shimmering liquid. "As for humanity, they bark loud but bite soft. They will negotiate, they will plead, and they will bow." The hall filled with cruel laughter. But not everyone shared his arrogance. One Velcor scientist, seated quietly at the edge of the room, whispered to a colleague, "You've never fought humans, have you? You don't understand. When they lose one world, they come back with fire that burns systems." On Earth, that prediction was already becoming true. The first completed ships launched into orbit, their engines glowing blue against the black void. News anchors called it the awakening of the iron sky. The footage of entire fleets rising through the atmosphere was seen by billions. Children pointed upward in wonder as massive warships eclipsed the moon. For the first time in a long while, humanity no longer felt fear, they felt pride. In every corner of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. The humans are preparing something. In sole command, Admiral Holt received the final readiness report. 500,000 warships, battle-ready, armed, and synchronized under a single fleet command. Their combined power rivaled anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the report loaded on his screen, Holt stood in silence for a moment, then said, "Bring up the transmission logs from Haven's Reach." The final message played again, faint and broken. "They're burning everything." He closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. Then he turned to his officers. "Not anymore," he said quietly. "Never again." Outside, as if answering his words, the Dauntless Prime lit its engines, followed by the thousands of ships in orbit. The formation spread across the void, their lights forming constellations of defiance. Somewhere among them, an ensign whispered, "This is for Haven's Reach." The fleet began to move, slow at first, then faster, until the entire Armada roared forward into the stars. The galaxy had taken one world from humanity. Humanity was about to remind the galaxy that it could take everything back, and more. The stars above Mars burned red with the reflection of flame and steel. Massive shipyards hung in orbit like crowns of fire, their construction rings spinning day and night. The echoes of welding torches and the hum of plasma furnaces filled the void as humanity's greatest creation took shape. Every worker, every engineer, every pilot understood what this meant. Haven's Reach was not just a colony. It was a piece of humanity's soul, and it had been torn away. Now, that loss fueled something unstoppable. Humanity was no longer mourning. Humanity was preparing. From the surface of Mars, the sky looked alive. Thousands of warships hovered above the planet, their hulls glowing faintly against the crimson clouds. The atmosphere thundered with the launch of new engines as fresh vessels ascended into orbit. News broadcasts showed the entire process. Titanic carriers being assembled, dreadnoughts lined up like ancient gods of war. The largest among them bore names that sent chills through the galaxy: Retribution, Vigilance, Iron Resolve, and the flagship, Dauntless Prime. It was said that if one stood in the deserts of Mars and looked up at night, the stars were no longer visible, only the lights of humanity's war machine. On Earth, factories operated without rest. Civilian corporations were nationalized overnight. Artificial intelligence systems worked alongside human designers to optimize every ship's weaponry and defense systems. The orbital elevators in Africa, Asia, and the Americas glowed as endless cargo ascended toward the shipyards. Every city on Earth had become part of the war effort. Yet amid the fury and determination, there was silence, an eerie, focused silence. Humanity did not cheer. It did not boast. It built in quiet, like a storm gathering strength. In a military base deep beneath the Alps, Admiral Taron Holt walked through a corridor lined with holograms. Each hologram displayed the face of someone lost at Haven's Reach. Men, women, children, ordinary lives turned to ash. Holt paused before one image, that of a little girl clutching a toy starship. Her file read, Lena Marek, age 7. The governor's daughter. The image flickered softly as Holt whispered, "You'll be avenged, little one." Then he turned sharply and entered the command chamber. The room was filled with strategists, analysts, and officers, all standing around a glowing three-dimensional projection of the galaxy. Red markers blinked where the Velcor Dominion held power. Blue markers, Earth's fleet, were spreading outward like a rising tide. A young officer saluted as Holt approached. "Sir, ship production has reached full capacity. The fleet count is at 487,000 and rising." Holt nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And the Dominion?" "Still silent," the officer replied. "They're reinforcing their border sectors, but they haven't issued a response. They don't believe we'll act." A dark smile crossed Holt's face. "Then they haven't learned who we are." At the same time, on the other side of the galaxy, the Velcor Dominion's council gathered in their crystalline fortress on the world of Syrexis. Their ruler, Lord Zarven, reclined on a throne of black stone. Around him, his generals and advisors argued. "The humans are mobilizing," one warned. "They are mass-producing ships at a speed we cannot match." Zarven waved a clawed hand dismissively. They always overreact. Their kind is emotional. They will build, posture, and then sit at our table begging for peace. They will not risk open war with us. Another general spoke up hesitantly, but their technology has advanced since the last conflict. Their drive systems, their adaptive armor, our spies report entire fleets being constructed simultaneously. Zarven laughed, his eyes glowing with arrogance. Let them build. They will burn their own resources dry. And when they do, we will crush them. The Dominion has stood for 10,000 years. Earth is a child among stars. But not every Velcor shared his confidence. Far from the council chamber, in a shadowed laboratory, a scientist named Relka studied intercepted transmissions. Her monitors displayed human fleet schematics and coded commands. She had spent decades observing humans, studying their psychology and their patterns of war. She whispered to herself as she watched their mobilization. "You fools," she murmured. "They don't build for war, they build for purpose. Once they decide to fight, it's already too late to stop them." Meanwhile, on the Dauntless Prime, the heart of the human fleet, Admiral Holt stood before the panoramic viewport. From there, the stars looked peaceful, innocent. Yet behind that serenity, millions of lives were readying for war. The bridge crew worked in silence, their hands moving swiftly across control panels. The Admiral's second-in-command, Commander Elise Varin, approached. "Sir, we've finished coordinating the fleet's formation. Every vessel is synced to the central command grid. Orders await your signal." Holt nodded. "And the colonies?" "United, sir. Every governor, every outpost, every shipyard has pledged their loyalty to Earth. There are no factions now. Just humanity." Holt's gaze hardened. "Good. That's how it should have been all along." Later that night, a broadcast went out to every human world. The Admiral appeared on every screen, his image solemn and clear. "People of Earth and beyond," he began, his tone steady but fierce. "Haven's Reach is gone. 50,000 lives taken from us without reason, without mercy. We gave peace a chance. We showed restraint. We built bridges with those who despised us. And what did we get in return? Fire. Now, we answer." He paused, his eyes meeting the viewers through the lens. "But remember this, we do not strike for vengeance alone. We strike to remind the galaxy what humanity stands for. We fight not for conquest, but for justice. When they look at the stars after this, they will remember that we were not the monsters. We were the storm that rose when peace was murdered." On every colony, people stopped what they were doing and watched. In the mines of Europa, in the domed cities of Venus, on the icy plains of Pluto, everyone listened. When the broadcast ended, silence followed. Then, one by one, voices began to rise. In homes, factories, and ships, people spoke the same words. "For Haven's Reach." It spread like wildfire across the network until billions were saying it together. The Velcor Dominion tried to ignore the movement. Their diplomats mocked Earth's broadcasts, calling them empty human dramatics. But deep down, fear began to creep into their hearts. Their long-range sensors detected massive shifts in gravitational signatures near human space. They dismissed it as industrial activity, until one day, the readings stopped altogether. Humanity had gone dark. All transmissions ceased. All signals vanished. To the outside galaxy, Earth seemed silent. But to those who knew, it was the silence before something vast, the silence before war. On the bridge of Dauntless Prime, Holt stood before his crew. "Fleet status." "All systems ready," Commander Varin replied. 500,000 warships at standby. "Awaiting your command." Holt stared into the infinite black of space, remembering the screams of Haven's Reach, the last words that had reached Earth. "They're burning everything." He took a deep breath, his voice quiet but filled with steel. "Then it's time to return the fire." In that moment, the order was given. Across every ship, lights shifted from blue to crimson. Engines flared. Hulls vibrated as hyperdrives powered up. And then, As if the stars themselves bowed before their fury, 500,000 human warships vanished into the void, heading straight for the heart of the Dominion. The galaxy would never be the same again. The stars tore open like wounds in the dark as 500,000 human warships erupted from hyperspace. For a heartbeat, the void was calm. Then the silence broke into thunder. The entire fleet appeared in formation around the edge of the Velcor Dominion's border worlds, blotting out the light from their suns. Hundreds of planets, stations, and defense grids suddenly found their skies filled with steel. The arrival of the human armada was so vast that sensors on nearby systems registered it as a supernova event. And yet, for all its size, the fleet moved with perfect coordination. Quiet, precise, unstoppable. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. On the bridge of the Dauntless Prime, Admiral Taran Holt stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the endless swarm of ships stretched across the holographic display. "Fleet integrity check," he ordered calmly. "All sectors responding," Commander Varin replied. "No deviations. Every formation is ready for engagement." Holt nodded. "Then we begin." He tapped the command console, and across 500,000 vessels, a single phrase appeared on every screen. Operation Retribution, initiate. From the command ship's exterior cameras, the view was breathtaking. Dozens of massive dreadnoughts, each as large as a small moon, drifted into position. Between them, sleek destroyers and carriers moved like schools of silver fish, their engines glowing blue. Hundreds of smaller escort vessels darted between them, forming shields of plasma and magnetic interference fields. The formation was so tightly organized that it resembled a single living organism, one heartbeat pulsing through space. On the first target world, Velcor Outpost Vornas 3, the inhabitants saw the sky turn to fire. The early warning systems blared across the cities as the first human ships entered orbit. The local commander, a pale-scaled alien with 4 eyes and a trembling voice, shouted into his communicator, "We are detecting hundreds, no, thousands, of human signatures. They've brought their entire fleet." His superior's response crackled with disbelief. "Impossible. No species could field that many warships." But as the command tower's windows filled with the reflection of descending vessels, disbelief gave way to terror. Admiral Holt's voice came over the open broadcast frequencies. Calm, cold, and deliberate. "This is Admiral Taran Holt of the Terran Defense Fleet. You attacked Haven's Reach. 50,000 innocents. This is your only warning. Evacuate non-combatants. Military resistance will be eliminated." The alien general scoffed, assuming it was bluster. They fired first. In that instant, the human fleet moved. The first volley came from orbit, a synchronized wave of kinetic slugs and energy beams that pierced the planet's defense grid like paper. The surface erupted with blue and white explosions that rolled across continents. The alien command towers vanished in seconds. Their anti-aircraft cannons fired desperately, but the human shields absorbed the blasts effortlessly. Within an hour, the Velcor military presence on Vornas 3 was gone. Cities that once mocked Earth's weakness now lay in smoking ruin. And yet, not one civilian target was hit. Humanity was furious, but not mindless. Reports of the attack reached the Velcor High Command within minutes. The council room filled with panic. 500,000 ships, one general shouted. They can't sustain that kind of fleet. Another snapped, "They've destroyed Vornas 3 in less than an hour. We need reinforcements." But Lord Zarven refused to believe it. "This is propaganda," he hissed. "They are bluffing. Send our fleet to crush them. Show them what happens when they challenge the Dominion." His arrogance blinded him. The Dominion's Grand Fleet, 1 million ships strong, began to mobilize across dozens of systems. But the humans were faster. Before the Velcor could organize, the human armada had already split into 10 divisions, each assigned to a specific sector. Every fleet was equipped with quantum-linked AI systems that allowed them to move and fight as one. The galaxy had seen powerful armies before, but never this, never a force that moved with both precision and emotion. Humanity wasn't conquering, it was correcting history. In one sector, the third human expeditionary fleet arrived over a Velcor industrial planet. The alien commander attempted to open negotiations, begging for a ceasefire. The reply came from the human flagship. "We tried talking before Haven's Reach. You answered with fire. Now, we speak your language." The bombardment that followed was swift and calculated, targeting only the Dominion's war factories. The explosions rippled through the night sky, visible even from neighboring moons. When the dust cleared, the alien civilians looked up at the orbiting human ships, expecting death. Instead, aid pods descended, medical supplies, food, and evacuation instructions. The message was clear: we destroy your armies, not your people. Meanwhile, the rest of the galaxy watched in horror and awe. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Dozens of alien ambassadors argued, their voices overlapping. "Humanity has gone mad," one shouted. "They will destroy the balance of power." Another countered, "They warned us. We ignored them. Perhaps this is balance." A third delegate leaned forward, whispering, 500,000 warships. No empire in history has ever done that. How long have they been preparing? But no one could answer. Humanity had hidden its strength well, its production, its coordination, its technology, all underestimated, all dismissed as impossible. Back aboard Dauntless Prime, Admiral Holt monitored the reports as system after system fell under human control. 7 Velcor outposts neutralized. Casualties, military targets only, Commander Varin reported. Holt nodded slowly. "Good. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. Phase 2 begins immediately." The communications officer hesitated. "Sir, with respect, what is Phase 2? Holt turned toward the viewport, watching as another planet burned below. His expression didn't change. "Phase 2, he said quietly, "is when they realize they're not fighting for victory anymore, they're fighting for survival." In the Dominion capital, chaos spread. News of one destroyed world after another reached the throne. Panic rippled through their people. Civilians began fleeing to the inner systems, while their leaders argued about who to blame. Lord Zarven finally saw the truth too late. "It was supposed to be a message," he muttered to his advisors. "We only wanted to remind them of their place." One of his generals replied bitterly, "And now they are reminding us of ours." As the human fleet pressed deeper into Dominion territory, something strange began to happen. Alien broadcasts from nearby empires stopped mocking Earth. Instead, they spoke with fear and admiration. The humans avenged their dead, one newscaster whispered on an alien channel. "They come like ghosts, their ships silent, their purpose pure. You can destroy their colonies, but never their resolve." Hours turned into days, and the Dominion's borders collapsed. The once mighty empire that had terrorized half the galaxy now found itself cornered. The human armada advanced without pause, leaving trails of shattered fleets and humbled worlds. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the attack stopped. The Velcor High Command waited for the final blow, but none came. Instead, every surviving Dominion system received a single encrypted transmission. It was from Admiral Holt himself. His face appeared on their central monitors, calm and unreadable. "You destroyed Haven's Reach," he said. 50,000 lives lost because you mistook compassion for weakness. You thought our silence was submission. But you forgot who we are. We are humanity. We build, we endure, and when we strike, we do not miss. Surrender now, and perhaps something of your kind will remain to remember what you did." The transmission ended, leaving only silence behind. Across the Dominion, soldiers dropped their weapons. Their fleets stopped transmitting. Their commanders wept. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Velcor realized they were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. As the human armada held its position, the stars around them reflected on the hulls of their ships, forming a sea of light. To those watching from afar, it looked as though the heavens themselves had gathered under Earth's command. The message was clear, not just to the Velcor, but to the entire galaxy. Humanity had risen, not as conquerors, but as the reckoning, The Velcor Dominion's empire was collapsing faster than anyone had believed possible. Planet by planet, outpost by outpost, the vast machinery of their rule crumbled under the unstoppable precision of the human armada. Once, they had boasted that no enemy could breach their borders. Now, those same borders no longer existed. For the first time in recorded history, their proud fleets fled instead of fought. But humanity did not chase blindly. Every movement was deliberate, every strike calculated. This was not chaos. It was vengeance shaped into strategy. From the bridge of the Dauntless Prime, Admiral Taran Holt watched the tactical map in grim silence. The holographic projection filled the entire chamber, showing a web of collapsing red zones where the Dominion once stood strong. Sector 9 secured. Civilian casualties minimal, Commander Varin reported. Our forces have established humanitarian zones in the captured regions. The civilians are cooperating. Holt nodded without looking up. And the enemy fleets? Retreating into the inner systems. What's left of them? The Admiral finally spoke, his voice low but steady. They thought destroying one colony would break us. Instead, they've awakened something they cannot control. His eyes flicked toward the glowing dots representing the human fleets, now surrounding the Dominion's capital system like a tightening fist. We've come far enough. It's time to end this. A few hours later, the Dauntless Prime entered high orbit over the Dominion capital world, Velcor Prime. The planet shimmered beneath layers of defense shields, surrounded by hundreds of fortress stations and war platforms. It was the most heavily protected world in the galaxy, a symbol of Velcor dominance. Their rulers had built it believing it could never be reached. Now, 500,000 human warships floated above it like silent gods. The sight alone sent shockwaves through every news network in the galaxy. Millions of aliens across other worlds watched the live feeds in disbelief. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive and emotional, now stood unmatched among the stars. Inside the Velcor command citadel, panic reigned. Lord Zarven, the once proud ruler, paced before his trembling generals. His armor, once polished to mirror perfection, now bore scratches and ash. They will not stop, he hissed. Every world they've taken, they leave standing but scarred. They could have destroyed us completely. Why haven't they? His second-in-command answered quietly, because they want us to feel this. To understand. Zarven slammed his fist into the command table, cracking the surface. Understand what? The general met his gaze. That mercy is not weakness. At that very moment, a transmission request appeared on the Velcor main console. The officers hesitated. It's from the human flagship, one whispered. Zarven's eyes narrowed. Put it through. The image of Admiral Holt appeared in the center of the chamber, calm and cold as the void behind him. His uniform was scorched in places, a sign he'd been near the front lines himself. Lord Zarven, Holt said evenly, this is your last chance. Order your fleets to stand down and disarm. Humanity does not seek the extinction of your kind. But if you continue to fight, your empire will end tonight. Zarven bared his sharp teeth. You presume to dictate terms to us, human? We are the Velcor Dominion. We ruled the stars while your ancestors still crawled through the dirt. Holt didn't flinch. And yet, here you are, begging for the chance to survive your own arrogance. The alien ruler snarled, you don't have the strength to destroy us. You're bluffing. Holt's expression didn't change. He gestured to someone off-screen. Demonstration, Commander. A moment later, the image shifted. From orbit, the Dauntless Prime opened a controlled firing sequence. A single beam of white-blue light lanced through the upper atmosphere of Velcor Prime. It struck a barren wasteland outside the main city, vaporizing an entire mountain range in one pulse. The tremor from the blast reached the capital within seconds. Towers shook, alarms screamed, and even the mighty palace quaked. Holt's voice returned to the feed. That was the lowest setting of our planetary rail cannon. Do you still wish to test the higher ones? The command chamber fell silent. Even the proudest generals lowered their eyes. Zarven's breathing grew shallow. What do you want? he finally muttered. Holt leaned closer to the camera. We want you to remember Haven's Reach. 50,000 lives, farmers, engineers, children, gone because your empire wanted to send a message. You succeeded. Your message was received. And now, this is humanity's answer. His tone grew sharper. We will not destroy your species. We will not burn your worlds. But your empire ends now. The Dominion is finished. Back aboard the Dauntless Prime, the bridge crew watched as the Velcor defense platforms powered down, one by one. The red warning lights across the map turned blue. The surrender codes began to flow through the system. Commander Varin exhaled, relief mixed with disbelief. They're standing down, sir. It's over. Holt didn't respond right away. His gaze lingered on the image of Velcor Prime, once a jewel of tyranny, now a humbled world beneath the shadow of human fleets. Finally, he said softly, "No, it's not over. Not yet." The Admiral turned to his communications officer. "Send word to all fleets. Cease all fire. Begin evacuation aid for the surviving civilian worlds. And record this for the Council archives." The officer nodded, ready to transmit. Holt spoke slowly, his words measured and heavy. "Let it be known across the stars. Humanity does not conquer. We defend. We remember. And when we strike, it is not for pride, but for justice." In the days that followed, the human fleet spread throughout the former Dominion worlds, not as conquerors, but as guardians. They dismantled military structures, disarmed orbital cannons, and distributed supplies to starving populations. Velcor civilians, who had been raised to fear humans as monsters, looked up at the massive Terran ships in awe. Soldiers once sworn to the Dominion now helped human officers rebuild communication networks. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy saw something new, not domination, but discipline. Not vengeance, but balance. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, reactions varied. Some species trembled at the sight of humanity's power. Others found hope. The Galactic Council convened, their voices hushed with fear and respect. One ambassador said quietly, "They could have wiped the Velcor from existence, and none could have stopped them. But they didn't." Another replied, "That's what makes them dangerous. Not their weapons, their restraint." On Earth, the people watched the broadcasts of the Armada's return. The skies glowed as hundreds of warships descended, their engines painting the atmosphere in streaks of light. Crowds filled every street, cheering and crying as the soldiers walked down from the landing docks. Humanity had endured, and it had triumphed, but at a cost that could never be measured in numbers. The names of the fallen were etched into massive monuments that lined the cities, including one that stood tallest in the capital. Haven's Reach, never again. Late that night, Admiral Holt stood alone on a balcony overlooking the ocean. The waves shimmered beneath the moonlight. He looked down at a small metal tag in his hand, taken from the ruins of Haven's Reach. The words engraved on it were simple: Lena Marek, age 7. He closed his fist around it. Behind him, Commander Varin approached quietly. "Sir, the Council requests your report." Holt didn't turn. "Tell them the war is over," he said softly. "And tell them the galaxy has changed." Varin hesitated. "Do you think they'll ever truly understand?" Holt exhaled, his eyes on the horizon. "Maybe not," he said. "But they'll remember. They'll remember what happens when humanity is pushed too far." He turned to face her, his expression resolute. "And they'll remember that mercy is not weakness. It's power." The next morning, as the first light touched Earth, the fleet began to stand down. Shipyards returned to civilian use. The guns that had burned across the stars went quiet once more. But every ship, every pilot, and every world carried the same message in their hearts. One that would echo for generations. Humanity does not start wars. But if forced to fight, it finishes them completely. And so, as peace returned, the galaxy looked toward the stars that humans had once called home. Those stars shone brighter now, reflecting the fire that had been both fury and forgiveness. And for the first time in centuries, no one dared to call humanity weak again. the galaxy had gone silent. After months of relentless war, the once boastful voices of the Velcor Dominion were gone. No more threats, no more arrogant declarations. Their fleets had surrendered, their worlds lay humbled, and their banners, symbols of conquest, were lowered one by one. The stars that had once burned with war now shimmered faintly in the cold quiet of peace. But deep within that silence, a new sound began to rise, the slow heartbeat of rebuilding. Humanity had struck with fury, but now it stood at a crossroads. The question lingered in every corner of the galaxy. What would they do next? On the command bridge of the Dauntless Prime, Admiral Taran Holt stood before the vast panoramic glass, watching the planet Velcor Prime rotate below. Its once proud capital city was half in ruins, smoke still curling from the ground. And yet, amidst the destruction, human landing ships were descending, not with weapons, but with aid. Thousands of containers filled with food, medicine, and shelter pods dropped into the broken streets. Human marines, once armed for battle, now carried stretchers. Medical drones flew through the air, scanning for survivors. The same hands that had destroyed the Dominion's fleet were now helping its people rise again. Holt watched it all in silence, his reflection in the glass as hard and still as the stars outside. Commander Varin approached quietly. "Sir, all major Velcor fleets have surrendered. We've secured every strategic sector. No resistance remains." Holt didn't look away from the window. "And the civilians?" "Our ground teams report mass evacuations from damaged zones. The relief efforts are underway. But," she hesitated, "some of the locals fear us. They don't understand why we're helping." Holt finally turned, his eyes cold but tired. "Of course they don't. Their leaders taught them that humanity was a race of beasts. They need to see with their own eyes that we are more than that." Later that day, Admiral Holt walked through the ruins of the Velcor capital himself. The air was thick with the smell of ash and dust. Alien civilians huddled in groups, their faces thin and pale, their eyes wary as human soldiers passed by. A small Velcor child clung to her mother's leg, staring up at Holt's uniform. The Admiral stopped for a moment, kneeling slightly. From his belt, he pulled a ration pack and handed it to the child. The mother hesitated, her sharp eyes darting between him and the soldiers behind him. Holt's voice was calm. "It's food. Safe." The child took it slowly, sniffing it before smiling faintly. For the first time in her life, she saw a human not as an enemy, but as a savior. As the days passed, the human relief operation became the largest in galactic history. Over 1,000 ships were assigned to reconstruction efforts. Power grids were restored, water systems repaired, and hospitals built in the ruins of old palaces. The symbol of Earth, the blue and white emblem of the Terran Concord, became a sign of safety wherever it appeared. Reporters from neutral worlds documented the events, sending footage across the stars. The same species that had once feared humanity now watched in or as human engineers worked beside Velcor civilians, rebuilding what war had destroyed. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chamber, the tension was unbearable. Representatives of dozens of alien races gathered to discuss the aftermath. "Humanity has become too powerful," one delegate shouted. "They control the largest fleet in the galaxy. What happens when they decide to turn on us?" Another replied, "They had the power to annihilate the Dominion, and they didn't. That tells you everything you need to know." A third delegate, his scales reflecting the light, said softly, "Perhaps they've learned what the rest of us forgot, that compassion can hold more power than any weapon." The council fell silent at that. For the first time in centuries, they couldn't agree whether to fear humanity or to follow its example. Back on Earth, the homecoming was unlike anything seen before. Cities across the planet erupted in celebration as the first ships of the Armada returned. Fireworks streaked across the night sky, and people filled the streets, waving banners of blue and gold. The faces of the returning soldiers appeared on massive holoscreens, their uniforms worn, their eyes weary but proud. Mothers embraced their children, lovers reunited, and for a brief, beautiful moment, humanity forgot the pain and remembered only that they had survived. But not everyone celebrated. In the quiet halls of Sol Command, Admiral Holt sat alone in his office, staring at the faint hologram of Haven's Reach. The image was reconstructed from old survey data, the ocean world that had started it all. Its once blue seas now gray and lifeless, its shining cities turned to ash. He watched the image in silence until Commander Varin entered. "Sir," she said gently, "the Council has asked for your presence. They want you to address the galaxy." Holt didn't move for a moment, then turned off the hologram. "They want a speech," he said quietly. "But what do I tell them? That justice was served? That peace has been restored? There's no peace in this, Varin. Not really. Just the memory of fire." Varin looked at him with quiet respect. "Then tell them the truth, sir. Tell them what we became, and what we refused to become." Hours later, the galaxy watched as the Admiral appeared on every broadcast channel. His uniform was clean, his posture straight, but his voice carried the weight of everything humanity had endured. "People of the galaxy," he began, "this war began with the death of a single colony, Haven's Reach. 50,000 lives erased because an empire mistook kindness for weakness. Humanity rose not to conquer, but to remind the stars that compassion is not a flaw, it is strength." He paused, his gaze piercing through the lens. "We did not destroy the Velcor. We rebuilt them. We did not silence our enemies. We showed them what mercy truly means. Let this be the lesson of Haven's Reach. When pushed to fight, humanity will fight harder than any world has ever seen. But when the battle ends, we will build again, because that is who we are." When he finished, the galaxy fell into silence. The speech spread across systems faster than any weapon ever could. On worlds far and near, species that had once mocked Earth now looked to it as a leader. The phrase "the Reach Principle" began circulating, a doctrine of power with restraint, of justice with compassion. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to recognize Earth as the head of a new alliance, the Concord of Worlds. On Velcor Prime, alien children painted the emblem of Earth on the walls of their schools. On Mars, scientists developed new technologies to heal war-torn planets faster. On distant colonies, miners looked up at the stars and whispered the same vow: never again. Humanity had changed the galaxy, not through domination, but through conviction. Late that night, aboard the Dauntless Prime, Holt walked through the quiet corridors, stopping at the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before him, peaceful and cold. Commander Varin joined him, standing at his side. "It's over," she said softly. Holt nodded. "For now." He looked out at the starlit void, his reflection merging with the infinite black. "But they'll test us again one day. Someone always does." Varin smiled faintly. "Then they'll learn again what the Dominion learned." Holt's expression hardened. "No," he said. "They'll learn what Haven's Reach taught us, that our greatest weapon was never our ships or our guns. It was our heart." The two stood there in silence as the ship drifted through the stars. The engines hummed softly, and the galaxy beyond them seemed at peace. For the first time in centuries, humanity wasn't feared for its rage, but admired for its mercy. And as the light from distant suns touched the hull of the Dauntless Prime, the reflection of those stars looked almost like tears across its surface, tears for the fallen, for the forgiven, and for the peace they had earned. The stars over Velcor Prime shimmered in quiet harmony, but beneath that calm light, the galaxy was still learning to breathe again. The war had ended, yet its echoes stretched across every system. From the broken trade hubs near the outer rim to the glittering halls of the Galactic Council, the aftershocks of humanity's campaign still rippled through the void. Some called it peace. Others called it balance. But to those who had seen it firsthand, it was something deeper, an awakening. The galaxy had finally seen what humanity truly was. Not conquerors, not monsters, but something far more dangerous to the old order. Builders who refused to stay broken. On the surface of Velcor Prime, reconstruction was in full motion. Cities that had once stood as monuments of pride now buzzed with the sound of unity. Human engineers worked alongside Velcor architects, erecting new structures that blended both their designs. The streets that had seen tanks and plasma fire now echoed with laughter. Markets reopened, and schools filled once more with children's voices. The world was healing, though its scars would never fade completely. A new era had begun, one forged not by treaties, but by understanding. At the heart of the planet stood the Grand Hall, rebuilt upon the ruins of the old Dominion Palace. The towering spires no longer bore banners of war. Instead, the symbol of the Terran Concord, a silver circle surrounded by 12 stars, shone at its center. Delegates from across the galaxy gathered there for the first Concord Summit. It was humanity's proposal, a council built not on domination, but on cooperation. Every world would have a voice, and no empire would hold absolute rule again. For many, it was the first glimpse of true equality in galactic history. Admiral Taran Holt entered the hall quietly, his uniform crisp but unadorned. The murmurs fell away as he walked to the center podium. Even among the most powerful alien leaders, his presence carried weight, not because of fear, but because of respect. When he spoke, his voice filled the chamber with calm authority. "We stand here not as enemies, not as conquerors, but as survivors," he began. "The fires of Haven's Reach burned more than a colony. They burned away our illusions, that peace can exist without justice, that unity can exist without compassion. We cannot undo the past, but we can build something better." He gestured toward the massive holographic display showing the known galaxy, now mapped with glowing lines of alliance. "The Concord will not be ruled by power. It will be guided by purpose." There was silence. Then, slowly, the Velcor representative rose. He was an older alien, his scales dulled from age and war. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "You destroyed our empire, Admiral. Yet here you are, offering us a seat at your table. Why?" Holt met his eyes. "Because we don't want your extinction. We want your redemption. What you did to us, what you did to Haven's Reach, will never be forgotten. But neither will what we do now. You taught us pain. We'll teach you peace." The Velcor bowed his head and said softly, "Perhaps that is a greater victory than war." As the summit continued, other leaders spoke of rebuilding trade routes, sharing technologies, and creating joint defense forces, not for conquest, but for protection. A new idea began to form across the galaxy, that humanity's power was not in its ships or weapons, but in its ability to bring others together. For centuries, the galaxy had lived under the rule of fear. Now, it was learning to live under the guidance of hope. Yet even as progress spread, humanity remained vigilant. The Dauntless Prime and its sister ships remained in orbit as a silent reminder that peace was not guaranteed. It was protected. On board, Commander Elise Varin walked the bridge, overseeing new patrol routes for Concord space. She paused as she passed a viewport, gazing down at the glowing planet below. The scars of war were fading, replaced by lights, millions of lights. "It's beautiful," one officer said softly. "To think this was once our enemy." Varin nodded. "That's the point. We fought so that someday we wouldn't have to." Meanwhile, back on Earth, the world had changed. Humanity's capital cities, once focused inward, now served as the diplomatic heart of the Concord. Alien delegates walked the streets of New Geneva and Solara Station, mingling with humans in peace. The once isolated species had become the architects of a united galaxy. Children grew up learning about the war not as a tale of blood and revenge, but as a lesson in strength and restraint. Schools taught the history of Haven's Reach, but also the words Admiral Holt had spoken afterward: "The fire that burns for vengeance can destroy, but the fire that burns for justice can rebuild." In the quiet gardens outside Sol Command, Holt sat alone on a stone bench, watching the sunset over the ocean. The orange glow reflected off the water, painting his face in gold. His hands rested on his knees, his posture still and reflective. He had led humanity through its darkest hours, and now he carried the weight of its brightest dawn. Commander Varin approached, her steps soft against the grass. "Sir," she said gently, "the Concord Summit has formally ratified your proposal. Every major species has agreed to the Peace Charter." Holt gave a faint smile. "Then we've done what they said was impossible." Varin sat beside him, looking out at the horizon. "The galaxy is changing, she said quietly. But I wonder, will it last? Can they really hold to this peace? Holt didn't answer right away. The waves rolled gently against the shore. Finally, he said, peace doesn't last by accident. It lasts because someone is always willing to fight for it. We built this alliance on trust, but trust must be defended. Varin nodded. And if the day comes when it breaks? Holt looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the twilight sky. Then humanity will remind them again. Elsewhere across the galaxy, small memorials were being built on every world touched by the war. On Velcor Prime, a massive monument rose at the site where the first human strike had landed. It was not a statue of soldiers or ships, but two hands, one human, one alien, reaching toward each other. The inscription beneath read, "From fire, we found understanding." Every year, both species gathered there under the stars to honor the lives lost and the peace that followed. For the first time in history, the galaxy moved forward not under tyranny, but under unity. Trade routes reopened. Joint academies were established to train peacekeepers instead of soldiers. And on the edges of explored space, humanity and its allies began venturing outward again, not to conquer, but to explore. The stars that had witnessed so much destruction now watched the birth of something greater than any empire. Late that night, aboard the Dauntless Prime, Admiral Holt recorded his final message as fleet commander. His voice was calm, the tone that of a man at peace. To the generations that come after, he began, remember that we built our strength from loss. Never forget Haven's reach, but also never let vengeance guide your hand. Power means nothing if it cannot protect those who cannot protect themselves. The stars will test you, as they tested us. When that day comes, remember, mercy is not weakness. It's what makes us human. He ended the transmission and looked out the viewport one last time. The fleet outside drifted quietly, lights flickering against the endless black. The galaxy was vast, filled with both beauty and danger. But for the first time, it felt united. Humanity had proven that even in the cold silence of space, there was still a heart that could beat strong enough to be heard across the stars. And as the Dauntless Prime slowly turned toward home, the engines ignited, painting the void in streaks of blue. The stars shimmered in their wake, as though bowing in quiet respect to the species that had risen from ashes, not to dominate, but to illuminate. Humanity had changed everything. The galaxy would never forget the day they answered with 500,000 warships. But more importantly, it would remember the peace that came after, and the lesson written forever among the stars. When humanity builds, the universe follows years past. The galaxy that had once trembled beneath the thunder of warships now glowed with the soft hum of peace. The Terran Concord had grown into something no one had ever imagined. A living, breathing union of species that worked, traded, and dreamed together. Planets that once fired at each other now exchanged envoys and engineers. Space stations that had once launched fleets now served as academies for diplomats, scientists, and explorers. For the first time in galactic memory, the stars were quiet, not because of fear, but because of understanding. Humanity had done the impossible. It had not only survived, but had changed the course of civilization itself. On Earth, the capital of the Concord gleamed brighter than ever. The city of New Geneva stretched from ocean to mountain, its skyline filled with both human and alien architecture, a testament to unity. At the heart of the city stood the Tower of Harmony, where representatives from hundreds of worlds met daily under a single banner. Holographic windows displayed the night sky in real time, each star a symbol of a world that now stood together in peace. And at the center of the hall, etched in gold, were 6 words that every delegate saw before speaking: mercy is not weakness, it's strength. Those words, spoken by Admiral Taran Holt years ago, had become the creed of the new age. The Admiral himself had long since retired from active duty. He refused medals, refused parades, and refused to be called a hero. Instead, he lived quietly in a small coastal home near what was once the old naval base. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and memory. Sometimes, when the wind was right, he swore he could still hear the faint echo of engines, the ghosts of his fleet crossing the stars. Each morning, he watched the sunrise, the the same way he once watched the dawn break over a battlefield. But now, it brought him peace instead of resolve. One morning, a shuttle arrived at his doorstep. From it stepped Commander Elise Varin, no longer in uniform, but in the elegant robes of a Concord ambassador. Her hair was streaked with gray now, her eyes calm and steady. Holt smiled faintly as she approached. "You look like you finally found something worth fighting for," he said softly. She returned the smile. "You taught me that peace is the hardest battle of all." She handed him a small holodisc. "The Council wants you to see this." When Holt activated it, a projection appeared above the sand, a massive structure floating in orbit above Mars. "The Unity Spire," Varin explained. "It's complete. The first interspecies academy dedicated entirely to peacekeeping and exploration. It will train both humans and aliens in diplomacy, science, and defense." Holt watched the image carefully, eyes reflecting the shimmering lights of the station. "So that's what replaces war," he murmured. "Not walls or weapons, wisdom." Varin nodded. "We couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head. "Without us. Humanity didn't win that war alone. The galaxy did." Later that day, Holt agreed to travel to Mars for the inauguration of the Unity Spire. As his shuttle rose through the atmosphere, he looked down at Earth, the blue marble that had once been dismissed as primitive, emotional, reckless. Now, it was the center of everything. When he reached orbit, he could see the spire from afar. It was breathtaking. A colossal structure made of transparent alloys and shining silver, surrounded by a ring of smaller habitats. Ships from every world drifted around it, their lights twinkling like constellations. Inside, thousands had gathered for the ceremony. The hall was filled with the faces of every species that had once been divided by centuries of fear. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder. The Chancellor of the Concord, a gentle, four-eyed alien from a world once enslaved by the Velcor, addressed the crowd. "This spire is more than metal and glass," he said. "It is the bridge between our past and our future. And there is one among us who showed what it means to build such bridges, not through domination, but through compassion." The crowd turned as the Chancellor extended his hand toward Holt. "Admiral Taran Holt, will you speak?" Holt hesitated, then stepped forward. The room grew silent as his footsteps echoed. When he reached the podium, he took a moment to look at everyone, the humans, the aliens, the young cadets wearing the symbol of the Concord. His voice was soft at first, but carried through the vast chamber. "I'm no hero," he began. "Heroes fight battles. Builders prevent them. When Haven's reach fell, we thought our hearts had turned to stone. We thought vengeance was the only way forward. But when the fires faded, we found something else in the ashes, our humanity." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We learned that mercy takes more courage than war. That rebuilding is harder than destroying. And that strength means nothing without compassion to guide it." As he spoke, images filled the air around him. Holograms of Haven's reach before the attack, of the fleet rising over Mars, of human and Velcor children studying together in the new academies. The room was silent except for his voice. "We built 500,000 ships to avenge the dead. Now, we build 1,000 more, not for war, but for exploration. Let the galaxy remember this day not as the day humanity ruled the stars, but as the day we learned how to share them." When he finished, there was no applause, just silence, heavy and powerful. Then, one by one, the delegates stood. Some bowed their heads. Others placed their hands over their hearts. And finally, the hall erupted, not in cheers, but in quiet, unified applause that spread like a tide. For the first time, the galaxy was not divided by pride, but joined in gratitude. That night, after the ceremony, Holt stood alone on one of the spire's observation decks, watching the stars. Below him, Mars shimmered red and calm. Beyond it, the vastness of space stretched endlessly, full of light and shadow. Varin joined him quietly. "You did it," she said. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "We did it. All of us." He looked at the constellations that once marked humanity's path to war. Now, Those same stars marked their path to peace. Funny, he said softly. We once sent 500,000 warships to bring silence to the galaxy. Now we send explorers to fill that silence with song. Varin smiled. Do you think it will last this time? Holt didn't answer immediately. The reflection of the stars danced across his eyes. Peace, he said finally, isn't something you keep. It's something you earn. Again and again. As long as someone remembers why we fought, it will last. He turned to her, his gaze firm but gentle. And if they forget, the stars will remind them. Decades later, long after the Admiral had passed, the legend of humanity's response lived on. The Unity Spire became the heart of the galaxy's greatest alliance. Its beacon, a soft blue light, pulsed across space, symbolizing unity. Pilots traveling through the void still whispered old stories. They told of a time when the skies burned, when 500,000 human warships rose from Earth and erased an empire, not for conquest, but for justice. They told of a fleet that taught the galaxy to fear, and a people who taught it to hope again. And on a quiet world rebuilt from ashes, beneath twin suns and calm oceans, stood a monument on Haven's Reach. It was simple, a circle of stone carved with words that every traveler could read in their own language. They destroyed a colony. Humanity answered. And from that fire, the stars learned mercy. When the sun set over the monument, the light reflected off the oceans, turning them gold and crimson, the same colors as the day it all began. And far above, ships bearing the symbol of the Terran Concord streaked through the heavens, heading toward distant galaxies. Humanity had not only defended its home, it had become the light that guided all others. The war was over, but its lesson endured, carved into every world, every heart, and every star. The galaxy would never again mistake humanity's kindness for weakness. Because from that day forward, one truth echoed across the universe, soft, unshakable, and eternal. When humanity rises, the stars remember.